I suppose the title is quite a good example of the sort of conversations we had and the sort of issues we had in bringing this book into English. As you said, Francisco, the title in Portuguese is Marrom e Amarelo, which means, well, if you look the words up in the dictionary, it'll tell you that those three words mean black and, so brown and yellow. That's the kind of basic, that's the sort of semantic, the words. One of the things that is complicated about translating always, and was a much more extreme version in some cases because of this book, is that when you're translating, you're not translating meaning of words, you're translating the kind of the whole culture out of which words are born. You're translating the entire the things that make languages contingent, which is to do with history and to do with culture and to do with politics and all sorts of things. Translating the word marron into English is a very easy one. Every dictionary will give you more or less the same sort of definition for it. The difficulty is because the conversations about race that are happening in Brazil are different to the conversations happening in English, and indeed across Brazil they're different in different places, and across the English-speaking world they're different in different places. Any word that is that has any kind of emotional load to it, any kind of cultural load, any kind of historical load, is going to map very uncomfortably onto the new language. And so what we ended up doing with the title is sort of, the title might be a little bit of a cop-out, actually. We ended up, and I can talk about this, how we kind of talked about the sort of discourse of race in the novel generally, and racism in the novel generally. In the title, we thought that anything that attempted to replicate what's happening in the title in Portuguese would be distracting at the very minimum. Partly because the sort of associations, when you're talking specifically about race and racial identity, of the words in the title are so different the way they're used in the book, where they are referring to two mixed race brothers, those two color adjectives. The associations we thought the readers in the English speaking world would have would be entirely distracting and offensive and, as I say, at a minimum, very unhelpful. So we ended up doing something really different with the title, Conversation between Paulo and our editor. It's a title that I think Paulo likes, that I actually needed some persuading. This was not a ready agreement for me on this one, but it's quite an interesting example of the way in which the things that look like very, very simple language, actually, that look like simple words whose meanings we understand, can't simply be rendered into another language, because those words have a huge amount of freight. There's a kind of valence of meaning that is much more than a kind of single word for word.